San Francisco prosecutor Paul Henderson. Paul, I'm going to start with you. This is just getting out of hand. Brittany's recent behavior, do you think this is going to jeopardize any custody issues she might have with her kids? Because K-Fed is looking supreme right now, like he's the ideal parent.
Well, she cut all of her hair off, and I think the world can agree that a shaved head, well, that's just sexy.
Yeah, you look pretty good, I gotta say.
Thank you very much. As for her erratic behavior, I think it raises two real legal issues that the world needs to be worried about or concerned with. And the first of those is whether or not this will rise to the level of maybe a child endangerment case. And then the second issue is whether or not this could affect the custody of her two children. As for the child endangerment issues, I think one of the things that the courts look at is whether or not she's being arrested, picking up criminal cases. Is she driving with the children without child protection seats? And we have seen some of that behavior in the past. I think one of the things that people are really concerned about is what is happening and what is the standard of care for the kids while she's out falling out from exhaustion, while she's out getting these tattoos or partying without underwear on. What's happening with the kids? And as for the custody issue, I think I would be very hard-pressed as a judicial officer trying to determine who is a better caretaker, K-Fed or Britney Spears. What I think would make this story really interesting is for one of the caretakers to come forward and either challenge custody or raise a red flag and say that there are some concerns about how the kids are being taken care of behind the scenes.
Is there any way that we can anticipate a suit against the city for allowing planes to fly over?
I think also instead of anticipating a suit against the city, what you'll see is maybe a suit attaching the airports that are regulating these small planes, or the airports specifically that don't regulate these small planes. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be a public reaction where people are going to want to have some sort of increased legislation or some sort of increased monitoring with the planes that are flying over big cities.
I want to ask Paul Henderson, San Francisco Deputy DA, because I had read, and I don't have any independent confirmation of this, that Muhammad Ali sold some of his rights of publicity for many, many millions of dollars to an investor who now has the right to do merchandising and advertising using his name and likeness. So why isn't it a transferable property right if somebody else is doing it?
Well, the courts determined that that right of publicity is so closely tied to identity that they are essentially the same thing. Now, what I think is important and what we really need to look at is what is he doing to use that identity and what is happening to those profits? Because to me, it is utterly reprehensible that he's using his notoriety in the context that he's using it. So he's signing autographs and using jerseys and helmets and things, but he's doing that in the context of at slasher conventions and horror conventions. And really, to me, that is profiting from the notoriety associated with these homicides, and that's what I find utterly reprehensible.
And I agree with you 100%.
Paul, let me start with you. You know, my view is if you are sane 2 years after the alleged crime, then you were sane when you were sentenced for the crime. I don't see how you're insane. 2 years later, you're sane and you pay no punishment, no penalty for killing your two daughters.
I think your sentiment reflects really what a lot of the public feels in cases like this. They have such a visceral reaction when we have crimes like this, and they're associated with the insanity defense. You know, it's still somewhat controversial, so much so, in fact, that some states have actually banned the insanity defense in criminal cases. States like Utah and Idaho and Kansas. It really shifts the focus for a prosecutor in courtrooms, because instead of focusing on who committed the crime, they have to shift and focus on the defendant's scienter, which is their state of mind, and it puts the jury in a position where they have to make an actual determination whether or not someone is mentally ill or actually criminally culpable.
All right, I'm going to start with you, Paul. The state bar is investigating Nifong's conduct. Shocking. How do you think the courts are going to determine if his behavior has been inappropriate?
Well, I think the rumors that we're hearing are about prosecutorial misconduct, but I don't think that's going to resolve the case, and here's why. The courts give a lot of discretion to prosecutors in criminal cases, and absent a showing of specific wrongdoing, I don't think that that's going to make the case go away. The standard is for prosecutors to seek justice and not use improper means to obtain convictions. I think the big fight on the horizon is going to be the defense counsel's motion to recuse the DA and try and take the case out of his hands and into the state attorney's office for a second reevaluation of the facts and evidence.
Oh, wow. Spoken like a true lawyer. That was nice, Paul.
Yes.
All right.
Thank
right?
you. Thank you very much.
Mesmerized.
Paul Henderson, what if the kid said, you know, I really didn't want to be with my parents. I like the guy and I want to live with them and I don't want anything to happen to him. Paul first, then Renee. I want to hear your responses to that.
You know, that's a really good question because I think it comes up a lot when we're dealing with children as victims. Because
Right.
one of the things we need to keep in mind is that children cannot consent to activities and behavior like this. When they're involved in kidnapping, when they're involved in assaults or sexual contact, especially children under the age of 14, there is no consent. It's not okay, even if the children say, I want to leave home, I want to leave my community, I want to go with you. It's not okay. It's still a crime.
You're a prosecutor. The cops, they've arrested Brady, but really, they probably want to pin this on Titus. They're probably going to try to get Brady to turn on Titus. Am I wrong?
Well, they've already told us what they're doing, and that is going through these tapes and going through these recorded conversations. And I think that's exactly what they're doing, is trying to find a link between Brady's behavior and Titus's information. It's clear what prosecutors are going to be doing is looking for things that will link them in terms of Titus facilitating, assisting, or encouraging Brady's behavior. And the tough questions that people are going to be asking are, how did Brady get that information and why did he focus on those specific individuals and was provided with, from someone, their full names and addresses, and also where did that money come from?
Yeah.
And also, why would he be focusing on these individuals but not for his relationship with Titus?
Right. What motive
So-
does Brady have to have these witnesses knocked off, you know, if there is any?
Let me go to Paul Henderson, San Francisco Deputy DA. Your reaction to that, I think it's a fabulous recommendation to go as past acts, not as rule of three.
I think so too. I think what you're going to see is an examination of all of these incidents, each one analyzed, and there is some statistical relevance as to the likelihood that these deaths occur again and again and again. And it's not so much just the rule of three that leads us to an inference of guilt. It's all of the other circumstantial evidence, like her testimony with the other witnesses that's going to be presented in the trial, that could convict this person again, the second time that this case is trial. I think the real issue in what the first case was, that the thing that the appellate court challenged was the scientific nature or the absence of the scientific nature for the rule of three. Because with this rule, the courts couldn't determine whether or not there was a margin of error.
Gotcha. It's almost like logic, not science.
Exactly.
San Francisco Assistant District Attorney Paul Henderson welcomes a no-spanking law. He just prosecuted a case.
Really hard cases. Those are really hard cases to prove.
And do you want to legislate something like that?
Well, we want to legislate what the minimum is. We want to legislate what the boundaries are. We want to make sure that the public knows that these are the standards and this is the limit.